Who do you think the best worker is from the Indies that's not in the WWE today?
A lot of them got taken up in TNA, guys like Chris Daniels and guys like AJ Styles. They get all the hype. I mean, Crowbar was always a great wrestler. He's still just as good. He should have got a job after WCW. He's still out there. I mean, there were guys that definitely had their shortcomings, Ace Darling and Simon Diamond, which again, a lot of these guys are getting some work in TNA. Steve Corino is really good. He's gotten some hype in ECW. He's more of a character. He's king of old school, and that's exactly it. He just, he's a student of the game, and it's a lot of guys. I think their time will still come. They're all pretty much relatively young. It's just, again, every generation will go by, and a lot of great wrestlers will never get their due.
If you could make a tape of 4 matches to last forever to give to your grandkids, which matches would they be?
Well, I have great matches that didn't have the hype.
Right.
Like on the Indies, like an ICW with Kahlua, where you just sit back and you see, we just did a million high spots. So, I mean, I can have you handpick any of those. But if you picked out matches that meant something with named wrestlers, like I said, just from like the Scorpio to The Rock, just because The Rock turned into who he was, right, to Shawn, to The Undertaker, and then when you go to WCW, where I had, again, the Wrecking Crew, and then that 6-man I mentioned from the Halloween Havoc pay-per-view. I mean, those type of matches there is where I can handpick them right now.
Does it bother you when you see less talented guys on, say, WWE or TNA?
It did at one time, and every wrestler will admit that, or they might not admit it, but it's true. There's not one wrestler that's ever wrestled. I don't care if you're 18 years old or 60 years old. There's not one guy that has not watched TV and said, I'm better than this guy. It's just like the way you lace up your boots is the same. I was big on that when I was, before I got my break. I'm sitting out there as an indie watching it, and I'm saying, oh God, you're seeing these big, like Warlord, these big like robots. And you're saying, even like guys that were like, I remember when they gave Mark Marrow, when he was Johnny B. Bad, green as grass, and you're saying, Jesus Christ, these guys are horrendous. Once you got there, then you realize how political it is, and then you see how the business works. And then I never said that again. I just knew what to expect.
Okay, I got, how did you wind up getting the Patriot gimmick?
Well, the Patriot worked out good. I was working for there was a 1-800-COLLECT promoter. That's who was a sponsor. We used to do all the Army bases. Okay, this is after WWF, and this guy had great, all these Army bases across the United States. He did it with all the indie guys like Honky and Jake Roberts and Nasty Boy, Knobs. And actually, it's funny because Chris Daniels was on those. He was just starting out. And we had done some shows. I was doing, I was just doing myself as a heel character, working with Brian Lee. And we were doing that, and we went to Columbia, South Carolina, and the promoter continuously tried to get hold of Del Wilkes. Well, this time Del was long gone from the business. I mean, Del had one tear after another, where the doctor said, "Don't ever get in the ring again," because his muscles became like rubber bands. That's what happens with the heavy drug and steroid use. Growth hormone, you get tears, and he had like 3 and 4 surgeries on his buys and his tries. So we said, never, ever got in the ring again, and just walked away from it. So we get there, and it was Honky Tom's idea. He said to the promoter's name was Tom Shade. He said, look, Brandi has the same build without the gas. He said he could do it just as good. He could work twice in the same show. The rest is history. I said, I approached him about it. No problem. Everything was fine. He was done with it. He was moving on with his life. Everything else was over. He was done. We knew each other from Japan. I've been doing it ever since, about 6 years. And it's great. It's added years and dollars to my life and my pocket. And it's just one of those things where I'll work on some shows. Shh, don't tell anybody. It's a secret. It's kayfabe. I'll work on some shows as both characters. It's double payday. So, I mean, that's what it comes down to. Did I ever see it coming? No. I mean, would I have ever done it? No. Honky Tom Man, which again, I've always looked up to. It was his idea. It was his, he'll take credit. I'll give him 100% credit. His idea, he said, to hell with it. I would never step on another man's toes. What I didn't want it to do was be the doink character, which there's a doink on every corner, because you can, but at least with this character, you had to look somewhat the part. Del had a great look. You know, he was, like I said, he was juiced to the gills for his whole career, which he had to keep the size. When I took it over, I don't have the build as him. I have close enough to the build that gets me by, and it's good enough, and that's it.
The stories about Del Wilkes' drug use a couple years ago hurt the Patriot for you.
It came and went so quick. I didn't even have one lashback. Nobody came to me at shows. It was really. I saw the article in USA Today, and I guess he's selling cars in Columbia, South Carolina. You know, wish him the best. And if he was still around, I wouldn't be doing it. I mean, I had enough work as a heel, and again, right now, I give the promoter the option. It just gives me more firepower getting booked, and it's added years to my career and more workload.
Would you ever be interested in becoming a road agent or a writer or booker at some point?
It's tough now because I was never in with that clique, and for them to bring me in now, I wouldn't fit in. You know, now I have a family, and I was glad that I wasn't involved at the time because it was easier being on the road. I've been married now for 5 years. My son's 2, and we have another one on the way. So I find myself loving being home now that I ever have. Again, it's called settling down, which it really is. So, I mean, unless it was something where I was in the clique and a couple of the other agents were guys I really loved, which isn't the case and will never be the case. I mean, that's what the bottom line is.
What advice would you give guys like talent wanting to get into WWE?
You got to keep plugging along. Do whatever. You get squeaky wheel. Do whatever you can do to get seen, to get heard. It's so hard now because of the limited amount of shows. You almost have to be a star on the internet. You really do. You have to be a star. You on the internet, send your tapes, go to the live events, show your face, and hope for the best.
Would you ever want to go back to WWF?
You know, you never say never. I'd say about 95% no, because it gets back to what I just said about agents. Who's in charge? I can deal with Vince. Vince doesn't like people that quit him, okay, or leave him on their terms. Vince likes to embarrass and destroy a guy and then just let him go. Again, it would have to be something where, like, say, I was with Johnny Ace in Japan, but we were never close. So it had to be a guy at a top job would have to say a good friend, which again, a very limited amount of guys that would have to offer it to me. But you know, that's what it comes down to. So it's like a 3% chance of ever happening.
Do you have any regrets?
No regrets. People think that you're going to regret quitting them. I was there long enough. I saw what was happening. I had a nice nest egg. I knew there was a ton of work out there for me, and it was just I refused to get beat as myself. I mean, I got beat as myself maybe under 5 times. I count on one hand. That was it. I saw where it was. Christ, I would have still been there if they kept me as Sal Sincere. I would have put over every guy in the company as Sal Sincere. I didn't give a shit. Every time the check showed up, it had my name on it. That became the bottom line. But when it became Tom Brandi, I said, no, I'm not going to embarrass my family. I'm not going to embarrass myself. And that's what it came down to.
Are there any promoters who have ripped you off over the years that you want to talk about?
You know what? Not so much rip me off, but I have a dead promoters list, okay? After wrestling 20 years, I've looked the other way a lot of times, okay? You always want to take a booking. No matter what bullshit happened last time, as long as they don't owe you money, you kind of like let time heal all, okay? There's one indie promoter. He's the biggest piece of shit on God's green earth. His name's Frank Goodman, okay? Other than that, him and the guy, it's up to 2. 2 guys in 20 years where they're on my dead promoters list is not bad. But it's basically along for the same lines. What they do is, Frank's biggest thing was he was a self-trained wrestler. He was good. Like I said, I worked for him his first bunch of shows. And then he's another guy that, like, his ego take him to other levels. He would never book me for a show, but then he would always call me to fill in at like half the money. Always like he was doing me a favor. Where it got to the point, I took a couple dates, and then I'm like, Frank, why don't you ever just give me a booking anymore? Oh, yeah, we're going to use you, all that bullshit. He just got to the point now, he's a fucking jack-off Jew from a Long Island that everybody hates, but he thinks he's created himself into some big dynasty. And I told him, don't ever call me. He was the first guy in all these years I ever told that to him. I said, don't ever fucking call me again. Don't write me. Don't email me. Don't do anything. You're dead in my eyes. And I said, that's pretty good for dealing with hundreds of promoters to where there's one guy. And it didn't even come over money. It was the fact that he didn't have the respect enough for me to book me once he became, a bigger promoter doing more shows, to the point now where he thinks he's Vince McMahon, which he's not, and he never will be, and that's the bottom line. But, you get jack-offs, as long as you get your money, which sometimes you're going to get your short money, you're going to get a long song and dance, and you're kind of trying to work around it. But that's what's allowed me to stay around this long, is being able to deal with a bunch of bullshit.
There's a rumor, and you'll know that there's some indie promoter, Carmine Sabia. I don't know if you know that.
Right, boy in the bubble.
Right, that bubble kid is in the bubble because of you. Is that true?
Oh, no. I never even met him. No, this is way before me. No, this is way before. I never met him. I've done one convention for him, and I was a fill-in like 6 months ago. That's all I know. I heard of him from Joe Panzerino. He never leaves the house. I mean, I don't know, I forget the name for it. Okay, he never leaves the house.
Agoraphobic, right.
Exactly. He's afraid. And I talked to him once, emailed him once, and that was it. I know nothing else about him.
Gotcha. What do you think makes a great match and a great angle?
Hard work. A great angle, it's both. They're both hard work. It was just two guys that can match. You have to put a lot of thought into a great match. I mean, when you have a pay-per-view show, you have 8 guys in a room putting the match together. That's what all the agents, all the guys that did everything in their career, just ask them, they'll tell you. They're the greatest. When you have all the road agents, put them together and they put that match together, they know it all. But that's a great match. And that's on the big leagues. On this level, again, 2 guys, you look who your opponent is, you know how much you can get out of them, think ahead of time what your moves are, what his moves are, and put it together. Angles, TV makes angles. These independent shows, it's tough to do an angle because there's no TV. TV, again, build it and build it and build it. And that's the power of television. Make great angles.
Anything you want to say to your fans watching?
The wrestling business has been in me since I was 5 years old. The fans have always been good to me. They continue to be good to me on the independent circuit. I said I have no regrets. There's very few things I could say I would do differently, which I'm happy about. And I said, after, you leave the federation, there's that degree of bitterness that leaves your system that everybody I've seen has and will always have, because nobody ever feels they got what they deserved. That's the bottom line. Nobody got the money, nobody got the push. They always thought, because they start believing their own bullshit. And that's what you'll always see. For me, again, I look at whatever I have in this world, wrestling gave it to me. I've gone to probably 15 different countries. I've been to almost every state there is in the United States, probably besides 10 that really aren't big wrestling shows. Took me, opened doors you can never imagine. It was my dream, made a life for me that you dream about when you're 5 years old. That's what it came down to. And again, like financially, put money in my pocket that nobody else could say they made. Did things with, invested, and just created more opportunities. And I'm just going to continue to do it. You know what I mean? I was never claimed to be the greatest, never be the worst. I definitely have my place in wrestling. I always will. And the bottom line is, you know what I mean? It was always something that, that little kid that always wanted to do it.
Well, thank you very much for doing the interview.
Appreciate it. It was quite a pleasure.